members of the Congress. My name is Anna Carvina Pidon, and I am a representative of Sharkano Consultants, and we are presenting here today about superstorms. And instead of just having our perspective on the issue, we invited a panel of contributing members of our society, and I wanted them to introduce their name as well as their affiliations.
My name is Tara Sullivan. I am a general with the Army Corps of Engineers, and I will be discussing the mitigation strategies today.
My name is Kevin Jung. I'm the financial analyst. I'll be discussing the economic impacts and costs of superstorms.
My name is Grace Allen, and I'm a former New York State resident and victim of Hurricane Sandy.
Thank you for being here with us today. So, you must be wondering why we want to talk about superstorms today. Why are you even here listening to this presentation? Let me direct you to a map of the United States. Focus your attention to the areas that are in really bright colors. Those are areas that are predicted to be mega regions in the United States by the year 2050. And we want to point out these specific areas right here. Because if you look at this map, this is the natural hazards map of the United States. And look at these areas where people will be living within the next couple of years. There are high risks of potential of natural hazards within these areas. And you, as our congressmen, are responsible for the lives, the livelihoods, and the well-being of the citizens that are within these areas. And this area of the United States has the greatest influence in our politics today. So especially those Congress people who are living there, you need to listen to this presentation because your decisions today will affect the people that will be living in the future. So superstorms are formed basically like a hurricane. It happens when warm water in the ocean is lifted up. As you know, hot air rises, so the heat from the ocean rises and forms a funnel. And because of climate change, there's a couple of things that we need to take a look at today. Meteorologists are really good at predicting things like superstorms and hurricanes, but there are a few things that are changing in our world that makes it difficult to do that. Number one is the instability of the climate. Right now we're experiencing warmer temperatures, which means there's a greater chance of hurricane formation because oceans are being warmer now. And there's also changes in the jet stream. So wind that is flowing towards more coastal areas, which means that more storms are headed towards land. This means that superstorms are going to happen, and we need to break the mentality that they're not going to happen, or they're just a fluke. We need to have the mentality that they are going to happen. The recent one that we just had was Superstorm Sandy. It hit New York especially bad. It happened October 22nd to the 31st. That wasn't even more than 2 years ago. 650,000 homes were damaged and destroyed. There were 117 deaths in the U.S. alone, which, ladies and gentlemen, is too much for a disaster in a third world country. First in a developed
You got it right.
There were 24 states impacted, not just physically, but economically as well. So this is a very national issue. And we wanted to invite Grace here today because she was one of the citizens that was living in New York at this time. Can you tell the Congress of your experience during this period?
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to speak today and sharing my story. My name is Grace Mahoney. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. Before Superstorm Sandy, I worked for Child Protective Services in New York City for 8 years, and I'm also a single mother of 2. So in July of 2012, I finally purchased my dream home. It was in South Queens. It was a modest home of 2 bedrooms, and the main selling point was that it had a very small yard for my children. On October 27th of 2012, I turned on the evening news to find that my dream home was also a Zone A home, which meant that I had to evacuate immediately. So I packed up my children and a couple of belongings and drove to West Orange, New Jersey, where my parents live, to stay with them throughout the storm. I thought that it would be a temporary arrangement, and a year and a half later, I'm still living with them. My house has not been rebuilt, as you can clearly see. Working with insurance has been a nightmare. I don't know where to begin with talking about the impact that it has had on my life. I've lost my job because the commute is way too long, so I'm really experiencing a lot of economic struggles. This has also had a huge impact on the lives of my children. They have had to change schools and start over. Also with dealing with living with my parents, there's just so many issues that has happened, and I know so many families who are in similar boats as I am. So I urge you, Congressman, to take this seriously, because I don't ever want another family to experience what I've had to. It's been nothing but a struggle ever since the incidents.
All right, thank you very much for sharing your story today. We're really appreciative of stepping up and doing that. And Mr. Jung, I also wanted to, I know it's affected Grace personally, but how has this affected our country economically?
Okay, so let's talk money, because that's why you guys all are here, right? So, Sandy cost about $65 billion to repair. That is the second costliest natural disaster, natural hurricane since Katrina. I guess there's no. Yeah, so in New Jersey, it damaged about 346,000 homes, and to repair those homes and other buildings that were damaged, it cost about $29.4 billion. And along with those losses, there was about $8.3 billion lost in businesses. So, I mean, people couldn't go to their jobs, our streets were flooded, so people couldn't go anywhere. And including New York, there was about 305,000 homes lost and $19 billion in physical damages. But that's not including all the business losses. And the governor of New York estimated that New York lost about $42 billion. So in total, Sandy cost American taxpayers about $65 billion. That's out of your pockets. And the subsequent drought that happened cost about $35 billion. So in total, that's about $100 billion, and only 20 of that was insured. Now you might be thinking, okay, let's just insure all the East Coast states. Well, let's look at Massachusetts real quick. So if a next Sandy were to hit, it could possibly hit Massachusetts or any of the East Coast states. So, according to my colleague at CoreLogic Inc., he predicts that if a hurricane of Sandy's magnitude were to hit Massachusetts, it would cost about $12.4 billion in damages. And now another colleague of mine at the New England Federal Emergency Management Agency states that it would cost about $74 million in premium to insure this. So you coast states might be thinking, let's just throw a bunch of money at Sandy or whatever hurricane comes next. But I am sorry to say this will not work. And let's look at Florida to show you why. So if Florida were to hit Andrew again, the first time it hit Florida, it cost about $25 billion. But since then, repairs and reconstruction has been made, but more people are living in Florida now, in those same areas that were hit by Andrew. So now, if Andrew were to hit again in present day, it would cost about $55 billion. That $25 billion, that half, made 11 insurance companies go bankrupt. Now, then how you guys want to deal with this is the National Flood Insurance Program. But I'm sorry to say, but that program is broken. That program has ranked up about $24 billion in debt. It was supposed to be self-sustaining, but yearly it costs taxpayers about $200 million. That's $200 million out of all your pockets. So, as we can see, insuring all the East Coast states is not a viable option. You cannot stop a hurricane with money. And my best recommendation would be stop building there. Stop building in those dangerous areas. But people won't move, people won't change. But there are better mitigation efforts out there, and Sarah will say next.
So thank you very much for your input, Mr. Jung. So keep that in mind. So we have someone here from the Hotel. If you want to introduce yourselves. What are some ways that we could mitigate or maybe perhaps develop in such ways that we can, I guess, reduce the amount of impact that comes from a superstorm?
So we can't prevent a superstorm from happening, obviously. That's out of our control, and we can't predict necessarily where it's going to hit. But what we can do is create mitigation steps for those areas most prone to having hurricanes hit. So we've created a 3-step mitigation strategy for the U.S. to adopt to help prevent losses, help protect lives, and all of those things to better prepare us as a nation for these disasters. First, prepare the public. We could create high school education programs, town hall meetings, pamphlets, all of these things so that the public knows what to do when these things happen and knows the severity of the situation. We can also improve those evacuation plans and alert systems, especially for large coastal cities like New York City, Boston, all those places that are most prone to have these incidents happen. The average cost per state is estimated around $600,000 to do this. The next step that we can do is enhance our natural resources. Our Earth provides us with ways to mitigate hurricanes. We can build up sand dunes, restore oyster beds, wetlands, reefs. All these things help along the coastline to prevent the damages that large winds, large waves can happen. Another thing you can do is combine natural resources with some of the structural things that we've done. So in the Netherlands, if you want to go to the next slide, they've done a dike and a dune strategy where they build up a dike, like you can see on the left side there, and then they build a dune over it. And the dike prevents a lot of flooding from happening for these cities, and the dune also helps with those, and it creates a nice beach for you to hang out. So those are great strategies that we can implement in a lot of our coastal states.
And I think we were chatting about this earlier. How would we even pay?
There's a lot of different ways to pay for stuff like this. We would implement federal grants for states to do that. The Army Corps of Engineers could be financed to do that through budgeting from the Congress. And then next, to just diminish economic losses. The easiest thing to do is, as David said, to move further away from the coast. So give people tax incentives to live farther away from the coastline. Give businesses tax write-offs to prepare their employees to do their businesses at home. So that way, if a superstorm hits and you need to stay in your home, you can continue your business and we can keep our economy going. And then encourage city councils to improve those building codes and building elevations and flood-proofing measures. Finally, I would recommend that we build some storm walls around our major coastal cities. This is an image of New York City and some of the storm walls that could be placed there. And this is an image here of another Norway city that could really be helped, that was very much helped by storm walls. Storm walls would cost about $16.9 million to build. But if you look at the amount of damages that have occurred and the cost of those, you're saving a lot of money in the long run and also protecting a lot of lives.
So these are some mitigation efforts, and Sharkino Consultants actually also wanted to bring up some ways that we can bring up our current resources right now to recover quickly if an event were to happen. So some short-term resources that we want you as congressmen to be aware of when you're doing public policy in your respective states. One, food and water supplies. Should another superstorm or hurricane hit your state, do you have enough money to fund for these kind of things? Do you have first aid and sanitation measures? And the Coast Guard and the National Guard are great resources for you to utilize. So build up those respective things in your community so that they can help with food and water supply distribution, first aid when things like this happen. And other things that you should look out for: debris removal and transport. Think about whether your city is prepared to do this. If temporary shelters are available. And the biggest thing that we want to emphasize is maintaining power in your respective states if a hurricane or superstorm were to hit it. New York was without power for 7 days when Superstorm Sandy hit. And I don't think any of us can afford to have another thing like that happen in your state if that were to occur. So just make sure that there's ways that you can help utility companies stay on power when things like this happen. In the long term, we also recommend bolstering the disaster relief fund. Currently, this has money in it, but none of it, or very little of it, goes to mitigation efforts, like what Tara was talking about. Instead, money is pulled out from this fund when an emergency happens, and it's more of a reactionary withdrawal of money. But instead of just using it for reactionary purposes, why not use it to mitigate and use 70% of this fund to actually to prepare and adapt our states to do that. We also want to try and do a carbon tax and try to implement that, working with the FASB to try and come up with ways to account for that so that we can earn government revenue in order for us to have money to mitigate these issues. And also proper insurance coverage, right, so that 11 companies won't go bankrupt. And resources are allocated through public policy, and you all have the means and the influence to do that. So we urge you to really take that seriously and think about how to prepare your state if another hurricane or superstorm were to happen. So in conclusion.
Yeah, in conclusion, we know that it will happen again. Superstorms are not inevitable. Our climate is so unstable, we need to prepare for them. And as a person and an individual who's been personally impacted, I just wanted to reiterate how important it is that as you as elected officials represent the people who elected you, look out for the most vulnerable people. So please do the right thing and invest in prevention and mitigation efforts.
And if you have any questions for our panel